What's going on, everyone, and welcome to Movie Emporium's movie review of the HBO Max original Lockdown. This movie is directed by Doug Liman. Now, before we begin, if you like this channel, awesome, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome, hit that like button as well as commenting below any video to watch, including this one. So the story of which is directed by Doug Liman and written, of course, by Stephen Knight, tells the story of Paxton and Linda, who are, of course, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor and Hathaway. Linda and Paxton are what was once considered a romantic couple because of the pandemic and because of what's going on. They currently live with one another, but because they're broken up, they actually live in separate rooms. They're constantly fighting with one another. It's one of those situations where you feel like someone's going to murder someone at some point because of how down the drain this relationship has gone. Chiwetel Ejiofor's Paxton character has a past history where he was in prison and now he is, a driver, but because of the pandemic, he's been furloughed. And Linda is a CEO of a company underneath a character who's played by Ben Stiller, who is a mentally stupid person in this movie, and she basically has to furlough and terminate a lot of positions, which puts her in the situation of being on one end of the spectrum of this current pandemic, and Chiwetel Ejiofor's character is on the other end. And in the process, they start to kind of just bicker with one another about how this and that, and the situation of that and this, and it becomes basically a story about how this couple who have different lifestyles have to work with one another through this pandemic. And so on top of that, Chiwetel Ejiofor is offered a driver job, but because of his, current situation of being an ex-con, he has to be paid under the table. But his boss, of course, is played by Kingsley, who is one-of-a-kind character. And once again, in this movie, he's very similar to the Ben Stiller character. And it leads into this heist situation where Linda and Paxton have a chance to steal a £3 million diamond. And all the kind of leads up to the ideas of that. So this story, this idea of this movie has the very interesting distinction of telling a story through what is our current pandemic or what is our current COVID situation, which is COVID-19, and trying to justify its storytelling by doing something interesting, doing something creative without disrespecting the fact that, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people have died because of it. And so therefore, does the story that is written by Stephen Knight, does the story that's directed by, of course, Doug Liman, is it justifiable in its nature? And so I went into this movie kind of interested because Doug Liman is a pretty good director. Stephen Wright has some really interesting writing abilities, which includes stuff like Eastern Promises, not stuff like Serenity, which was a terrible film. And it has a great cast, to be fairly honest. A very small cast, but a great cast, which, like I said, includes Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway, which are the leads, Ben Stiller and Ben Kingsley, which are still great actors, and Dulé, who was, of course, in The West Wing. And it's a movie that was something I was intrigued by because it actually looks like it was taking the material seriously and doing something interesting with it. And so going into this movie, hoping for the best, hoping for a good time and, respectful nature of what's the material that's been presented. I'll be fairly honest, this movie just wasn't for me at all. I don't feel like the characters had any chemistry in it. I didn't like where their characters headed. I didn't like the resolve of the characters. I didn't like the fact that, if these characters are bickering with one another so badly, why didn't Linda is a CEO, she can find a hotel and stay at, or, move back home to Americas. It's just a movie that just doesn't feel like that. It's basically feels like it's constrained, and it's, simple fact of it's having to film a movie during the COVID situation. And I just, once again, don't think using the COVID situation is the right move at this point. The COVID situation is at its worst at the moment, and you're using this as a plot device for a comedy heist movie, and it doesn't work. Honestly, it doesn't feel like it's. I don't know what happened here, because also when you have Ben Kingsley pop up, and like I said, Ben Stiller, they're like the representation, the idea of the worst CEOs or the worst corporate, individuals that you can find in a script written form. And I was sitting here watching this movie cringing at every turn. I mean, there's points in this movie where, Chiwetel Ejiofor's character is talking about a hedgehog, which he calls Sonic. And there's, ideas with opium that is growing in their backyard. And, the Anne Hathaway character is having to hide the fact that she's smoking cigarettes. And there's a whole idea with the bike, and then, like I said, the whole heist stuff is just ridiculous and so out of whack. And maybe it's just once again proving that Stephen Wright is maybe just a hit or miss writer. Once again, he's worked with Anne Hathaway for the second time, and once again for the second time he's created a movie that just isn't very good or just bad. It really is. Doug Liman is really hit or miss when it comes to directing. You know, he'll have something like Swingers or Go, and then he'll do something like Mr. and Mrs. Smith or, you know, Jumper or something like that, and then he'll go and do something like Live, Die, Repeat, and it's just like, I don't know. Maybe I had a little more hope than what this movie was going to end up presenting to me, but it's just not a very good movie. It really isn't. Nothing about this movie is even remotely interesting, and like I said, Dulé Hill, who of course comes from The West Wing, is just kind of thrown in there as Chiwetel Ejiofor's brother, and Dulé Hill's American and Chiwetel Ejiofor is British. And I'm like, I'm like, what? I'm like, what? That was a lot of me going through this entire movie. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? I keep saying that, but I'm like, I'm sitting here going, I'm scratching my head going, what is, that's supposed to be funny? I mean, maybe, I don't know. This movie is just, it's a weird mess of a movie that doesn't have a lot of good construct when it tries to tell its story. You know, like I said, the parts that are interesting are when, like, Chiwetel Ejiofor goes in the middle of the street, which how people enjoy this, I don't know. Maybe people are just bored about living in their house. But he goes out and speaks sonnets and, you know, speaks verses from, you know, famous poems and stuff like that. And then I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then it just kind of becomes depressing and just, I don't know. It's just not a very good movie. And then there's a running joke in this movie that Ben Kingsley ends up, for a delivery job that he has Chiwetel Ejiofor's character doing, he changes his name to Edgar Allan Poe. And I'm like, and Chiwetel Ejiofor is the voice of reason going, you do realize that's a famous person, and Ben Kingsley's trying to act like he doesn't know who he is. And I'm like going, you're telling me that the people who are guarding the diamond are not going to know who Edgar Allan Poe is? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm more learned than some people. I don't know. But that joke just didn't land with me. And it's a very important moment in the movie. That's all I can really say, because it's a baffling movie. But it's definitely not a good movie. I'll definitely give you that. None of these characters work. The performances are all terrible around the board. And it's a shame, because once again, it's a great writer, great director, and has a great cast. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if they just didn't have the allotment of what they wanted to do. But try not to make your movie during the COVID situation, or try to have it as your backdrop, because it just never works. It's going to be interesting to see what Mission Impossible 7 does, if that movie's going to work on the idea that they're filming during COVID. But yep, that's locked down from HBO Max. Yeah, sucks. So anyways, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this movie. Did you like it? Did you not like it? If you liked it, let me know why. You know, I'd be interested to know. But otherwise, if you like what you see on my channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And of course, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.